One thing that I get asked all the time is some form of the question, what is the best camera for my budget of X amount of dollars? And I usually respond with, well, is that your total budget or just your camera budget? And people usually say their total budget because people starting out in video want to get the best possible camera they can afford because they assume that's what makes a good video. Trust me, this is exactly what I thought too. However, there are some other very important things that you'll need aside from just the camera if you want to make good videos. So I'm going to show you this complete beginner's filmmaking setup that I came up with for under $1,000. Hey everyone, Camber here, showing you how to use your camera to make good videos. And today I'm going to be covering 4 things for this filmmaking setup. That is the camera, the lens, the microphone, and the tripod, all of which are linked in the description. However, the one thing that is not included in this is an SD card, because SD cards can vary greatly depending on the size capacity and the speed class rating of the card. However, you can get a good 64 gigabyte card, which should be plenty of space for this camera for only 20 bucks. Plus, there are a lot of package deals where you get an SD card like that included with the camera. So we have the Sony A6100 with the 16 to 50 millimeter kit lens, and this is the camera that I cover in my best cameras for beginner filmmakers video on the Sony side. And the great thing about this is it gives you 4K at 24 frames per second with no cropping. And if you're wondering what I mean by cropping, if you're to get something similarly priced like the Canon M50, when you shoot at 4K, it crops into a smaller portion of the sensor, which basically, if you were to shoot at 50 millimeters on this camera, when you're shooting 4K on that one, it would be like you're shooting at 85 millimeters. So it zooms in a lot and it makes it a lot harder to use that 4K depending on how much space you have to make your video. And you also have the option of shooting up to 60 frames per second at full HD with no crop. So when you play that back for slow motion, it'll be playing 2.5 times slower. Or you can shoot all the way up to 120 frames per second in full HD, although there's a slight crop at about 1.1. And when playing that back, it'll be 5 times slower, giving you an even smoother slow motion. And then looking at autofocus, this thing has great autofocus in all modes and gives you the option of touch autofocus and even touch tracking. So what that allows you to do is you put your camera up, you push on something you want to focus on, you push on something else, and it'll rack focus to those different things. It makes focus pulling super easy. And I wish I had something like this when I started, because I remember just sitting there with manual focus trying to hit points, and it can be difficult, especially if you're under a time crunch or it's a live event, something like a wedding where you don't want to be messing up and you can't just be like, hey bride, can you walk down the aisle again for me please? That's not a good thing. And you also have the option of touch tracking, where you can touch something on the screen and it'll track that object and focus on it, which is really helpful for things that move closer or further away from you. And then when it comes to the lens, we're using the 16 to 50 millimeter kit lens that comes with this camera because we're trying to keep the cost down. Now, this camera has an APS-C size sensor. And, oh, hold on just a second. And when compared to something like this, A7 III, this has a full frame sensor, whereas this is an APS-C sensor. You can see this one is a lot bigger. And so this APS-C sensor crops in 1.5 times on your lens, which means that the 16 to 50 millimeter lens on this camera is actually more like a 24 to 75 millimeter lens, which is a great focal length because I actually use a 24 to 70 on my camera most of the time. But the thing that I don't really like so much about it is that it has a variable aperture between 3.5 and 5.6, which means that as you're down at 16 millimeters, the lowest aperture you can go to is 3.5, which will give you a decently shallow depth of field. But as you zoom in to 50 millimeters, that minimum aperture is going to automatically raise up towards 5.6 by the time you get to 50 millimeters, which won't give you as shallow of a depth of field, but it also is going to be an increase in about 1.3 stops of light. And if you don't know what I mean by stops of light or aperture, all these things, I have lots of videos on crop sensors, exposure. I'll link all that stuff in the description so you can learn more about that. So this isn't my favorite type of lens, but it's still good for starting out. It'll give you good quality images, a decent depth of field, and it's a good focal length range, so you can play around, learn how to make it look good, and then you'll know which focal lengths you like to use the most, so when you upgrade in the future for those better lenses. On this camera, you can customize pretty much any of these buttons on here aside from the menu button. So all those functions that you use a lot, like metering modes, autofocus modes, white balance, you can access that really quickly instead of having to dig through the menus to get to those options. And of course, it's always good to have a flip up screen so that you can see yourself when you're recording. You know, you want to do some vlogging like this, hey guys, what's up, how you doing? Or just talking head type stuff, really good to be able to see yourself. However, the only bad thing about having a flip up screen like this rather than a flip out screen is once you add on a microphone, get that on, pop open the side, plug in your mic, and now when you flip the screen up, as you can see, you don't get quite as good a view of yourself anymore. So when you're setting it up, it's totally usable. I've been vlogging with this, testing it out. It works fine because the whole idea with these screens is that you're setting it up initially, framing yourself to make sure you're how you want to be, and then you're going to be talking to the lens, because if I was sitting here looking up at the screen the whole time, talking to that, looking at myself, it's just kind of awkward rather than looking down at you while I'm talking. And there are other options with low-cost adapters that hold the microphone off to the side so that you can still then have full access to the screen. And that brings us to sound, which is very important. Most people starting out don't realize that audio is like half the quality of your video. If you were to watch a video with really bad audio, you're probably going to click off of it really fast, even if it has great visuals, because people associate bad audio with bad videos. But you can have a video with, okay video quality but really good sound, and people are willing to forgive that because it just sounds really good and it makes it seem even better. So what we have here is the Rode VideoMicro to go with this camera, and I'm actually going to take it off here. We're going to go do a sound test to see how it sounds with just the camera and then the camera with the mic. So right now I'm recording on the A6100 just on the raw camera audio, and you can hear it's not like terrible. You can definitely use this, but what I want to show you is we're going to set this down. When I'm close, it's not that big a deal because as you can see here, we have tiny little microphone inputs here and here. So as I move further away from you, you're going to notice that the sound starts to get worse and worse, which is the same with any microphone. The further away you are, the worse the sound gets. And there's going to be a lot more echo. It's going to start to pick it up from bouncing all around the room and not be nearly as good. But as I get closer, then it starts to sound a lot better. So now let's take this guy, Rode VideoMicro, and we're going to test it out in the camera. So now just to compare, we have the Rode VideoMicro on top of the camera, and hopefully already you can tell that the audio is a lot more focused. It's a little bit more crisp, and I'm going to set the camera down once again and show you that even with the better microphone, as you move away, your sound quality is going to be worse because the sound's having to carry, it's going to echo. But the thing is, because this mic is a lot more directional, a shotgun mic, it's not going to pick up sound from behind, and there won't be as much echo because it's only taking in straight through the mic. But to compare, if I was to turn the camera around and do something like this, well, now it's not going to pick up as much, it's not going to sound as good because I'm behind it. If you're making a video where you're showing things, you can turn the mic around like this on the camera, and then you can show what you want as you're going around talking about stuff, and that's another option with these microphones. You just get a bit creative. And finally, it's always important to have the option to put your camera on something when recording. For example, if you're sitting here recording yourself like me, you want to be able to set your camera down on something, or even if you're filming handheld, it's better to be able to hold on to something rather than just this, because with little cameras especially, they pick up a lot more of the bumps. So what we have here is the Manfrotto PIXI EVO Mini tripod. And this is the red and gray version. There's a black version as well, but this one was cheaper, so we're trying to keep the cost down, but you can obviously get whichever one you want. Boom, that is the tripod. Easy to hold here or up here, however you want. The legs all extend so you can set the camera down easily. There's also a switch here that lets the legs come up even further so you can set it down more flat on top of a table or something like that if you want to. Also, the head moves around, so you could easily set the camera up like this. If you wanted to vlog, boom, now you can see yourself just fine. Obviously, you're going to put the screen up like we talked about before, or the feet extend as well, so that'll give you some more height if you're setting up like a tripod, or if you want to have even more of a distance from yourself while you're filming, that helps out there. And there's also a little notch here in the side. So let's say you want to do some kind of TikTok or Instagram video type of thing, boom, you're good to go there as well. But this isn't like any type of good fluid head tripod. You could try to sit here and do some pan, tilt type of stuff, but it's not going to work that well. This is more so something just to get you started, have stabilization, have a good hold of your camera, and learn how to make these types of things work well while you're learning handheld techniques for your video camera. And this setup will cost you $949, giving you that good camera with the 4K video, full HD up to 120 frames per second for the really nice, smooth, slow motion. You have all the button customization, the touch autofocus, the screen that flips up so you can see yourself, the microphone that's giving you the good quality audio, as well as the tripod. However, if you don't mind going about $2 over budget, then I would suggest getting this Joby Gorillapod over the Manfrotto tripod. This is made out of metal. It's a lot sturdier. It has a removable head here, so this screws on the bottom of your camera. You stick it in there, tighten it up. You can easily put your camera on and off this thing very quickly. It also has the movable head with the knots just like the other one. You can also spin this around depending on what you need to do with that. And then I'm sure you've seen, YouTubers and all that kind of stuff vlogging with these types of things. You have plenty of reach on this if you want to do that. But also these legs are very useful aside from just using it like a tripod, setting it up. I've used this all over the place. Put it on handrails. You can twist the legs around and put it in weird places like that. I've gotten all kinds of time lapses of different famous places. I put it in trees before with using these legs. It's really versatile what you can do with it. I've used it for lights, all kinds of stuff. So if you use this rather than the Manfrotto, that'll bring your total to $1,002 to pair this with the camera and microphone. And if you have any questions about any of these products, leave them in the comments below and I'll try to clarify anything that I can. And if this video is helpful, then please hit that like button and subscribe if you're new and watch more videos, because I have lots of playlists teaching you how to go from knowing absolutely nothing about using these cameras for videos to being able to make great videos that people will even pay you for. So definitely watch more. And with that, hopefully, I'll see you soon.